Morgan Chen never considered himself particularly confrontational. At 34, he built a life around avoiding unnecessary drama, choosing a peaceful cul-de-sac in the Willowbrook Estates, working remotely as a software developer, and generally keeping to himself. His modest two-story with the blue shutters and meticulously maintained backyard oasis had been his sanctuary for 3 years. The pool, a luxury he justified as an investment in his mental health, had been worth every penny of the installation costs and subsequent increase in his property taxes. What Morgan hadn't factored into his peaceful existence was Diane Whitfield, the self-appointed queen of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. From his home office window, Morgan watched as Diane made her daily patrol of the neighborhood, clipboard in hand, her platinum blonde bob never moving despite the spring breeze. Even from a distance, her perpetual frown was visible as she made notes about a neighbor's unauthorized garden gnome or another's garbage can that had remained at the curb 2 hours past the HOA-mandated retrieval time. Classic Diane, Morgan muttered, turning back to his computer. He had a deadline looming, and the last thing he needed was to get drawn into another HOA squabble. Last month, she'd left a passive-aggressive note about his hedges being half an inch taller than regulation. The month before that, she called an emergency meeting because someone had hung string lights on their patio without prior approval. Morgan's phone buzzed with a notification from his security app. He was leaving tomorrow for a weekend conference in Seattle, his first trip away from home in months, and he'd been double-checking all his security measures. The app showed someone at his front door. Puzzled, he clicked on the notification to see Diane's face filling his doorbell camera, her expression a mixture of determination and the artificial pleasantness she wore when she wanted something. With a sigh, Morgan headed downstairs. Whatever she wanted, it was better to deal with it now rather than let it fester into a formal HOA complaint. Diane, he said as he opened the door, not bothering to mask his lack of enthusiasm. What can I do for you? Morgan. Wonderful to catch you at home, Diane chirped, her voice carrying the forced cheerfulness that made his skin crawl. I noticed you've been loading up your car. Going somewhere? The directness of the question struck Morgan as odd, even for Diane. Just a quick business trip, he replied cautiously. Is there something you needed? Diane's eyes flicked past him into the house, then back to his face. Oh, nothing urgent. I just wanted to remind you about the monthly HOA meeting next Tuesday. She paused, then added, and to make sure your pool maintenance service will be coming while you're away. You know how strict the board is about stagnant water, mosquito concerns, and all that. Morgan frowned slightly. He never mentioned his pool service schedule to Diane, and it struck him as strange that she was suddenly concerned about his pool maintenance. Everything's taken care of, he said firmly. The pool service comes every Wednesday and my security system is set up. The house will be fine. Of course, Diane nodded, a strange smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Well, have a safe trip then. As she turned to leave, Morgan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Diane had never shown interest in his travel plans before, and the way she asked about the pool. He closed the door and leaned against it, a sense of unease settling in his stomach. On impulse, he pulled out his phone and opened his security app again. Maybe he should add a few more cameras before he left tomorrow, particularly ones with a good view of the backyard pool. Sometimes, Morgan reflected, it paid to be a little paranoid when dealing with people like Diane Whitfield. The last thing he needed was to come home to an HOA violation notice, or worse, an actual problem with his property. Little did he know, his instincts were about to prove far more accurate than he could have imagined. Morgan's flight wasn't until 11 a.m., but he was up at dawn, double-checking his preparations. Something about Diane's visit the previous day had left him unsettled enough that he'd installed 2 additional wireless cameras overnight, one with a perfect view of the pool area and another covering the side gate that led to the backyard. Probably being paranoid, he muttered as he synced the new devices to his phone app. The security system now sent alerts for any motion detected around the property. With live video he could check from anywhere. He'd also called his neighbor, Raj, asking him to keep an eye on the place while he was gone. You think HOA Diane is going to break in and measure your countertops for violations? Raj had joked when Morgan mentioned his concerns. Laugh all you want, Morgan replied, but something about her asking about my trip and the pool seemed off. As he loaded his suitcase into the trunk of his car, Morgan noticed Diane power walking down the street, her designer athleisure wear painfully bright in the morning sun. She waved with exaggerated friendliness when she spotted him. Heading out, she called. Yes, just leaving, Morgan replied, closing his trunk with perhaps more force than necessary. Have a wonderful trip. Don't worry about a thing here, Diane said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Morgan nodded curtly and got into his car. As he backed out of the driveway, he watched Diane in his rearview mirror. She had stopped walking and was staring at his house with an intensity that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. When she pulled out her phone and appeared to be typing something, he had half a mind to turn around and cancel his trip altogether. But that was ridiculous. What could possibly happen? The worst would be another passive-aggressive note about some obscure HOA violation. The drive to the airport and the subsequent flight to Seattle were uneventful. By the time Morgan checked into his hotel and headed to the conference center for the evening networking session, he had almost forgotten about his concerns. Almost. During a break between speakers, he found himself reflexively opening his security app to check on his house. Nothing appeared amiss. The cameras showed his empty driveway and peaceful backyard. The pool water rippled gently in the breeze, undisturbed. Morgan exhaled, feeling slightly foolish about his paranoia. That night, after returning to his hotel room, Morgan was preparing for bed when his phone pinged with a notification. Motion detected at side gate. He quickly opened the app, heart rate accelerating. The night vision camera showed a figure moving cautiously along the side of his house, carrying what appeared to be a large bag. "What the hell?" Morgan muttered, quickly switching to the pool camera's feed. The backyard lighting set on a timer illuminated the space dimly. To his shock, the pool cover had been removed. As he watched, a side gate opened and the figure entered, placing the large bag on one of his patio chairs. When they turned toward the house, a security light caught their face. Diane Whitfield. Morgan sat up straight, disbelief turning quickly to anger. What was she doing in his backyard at 10 p.m.? He watched as she pulled out her phone, tapped the screen several times, then walked to the pool equipment shed. With growing outrage, Morgan realized she was trying to turn on his pool heater. Before he could process this further, another notification pinged. Motion detected at front door. Switching cameras, Morgan saw 3 cars now parked on the street in front of his house. A group of well-dressed middle-aged men and women, people he recognized vaguely from HOA meetings, were walking up his driveway carrying coolers and tote bags. The realization hit him like a bucket of ice water. Diane wasn't just snooping around his property, she was hosting a party. At his house, without his permission. Morgan's hands shook slightly as he called Raj's number. "Hey man," Raj answered, sounding half asleep. "Everything okay?" "No, everything's not okay," Morgan replied, his voice tight with controlled fury. "I need you to go to my front window right now and tell me what you see." There was rustling on the other end of the line, then a pause. "Dude," Raj finally said, his voice incredulous. "There are like 15 people going into your backyard. And is that Diane Whitfield directing traffic in your driveway?" Morgan closed his eyes for a moment, his suspicions confirmed. "Call the police, Raj. Tell them there are trespassers at my house. I'm going to book the first flight back I can find." As he hummed up and frantically began searching for return flights, his security app chimed again. He looked down to see his backyard transformed. String lights had been hung around his pool deck, music was playing from a portable speaker, and Diane Whitfield stood at the center of it all, raising a champagne glass in toast to what appeared to be the entire HOA board. All uninvited guests in Morgan's absent home. Morgan found a red-eye flight leaving in 2 hours, booked it without hesitation, and tossed his belongings haphazardly into his suitcase. As he rushed to check out, his phone continued to light up with security notifications. Each alert felt like a personal affront, strange hands touching his property, unfamiliar feet tracking across his carefully maintained lawn. Through the security app, Morgan watched the party grow. What had started as 15 guests had swelled to nearly 30. The pool was now filled with people, HOA board members and other neighborhood residents splashing around in his private sanctuary. In the corner of the frame, Morgan spotted Diane giving someone a tour of his patio, gesturing at his grill as if she were a realtor showing off amenities. "Unbelievable," he muttered, showing his rideshare driver the continuous stream of footage. "That's my house. Those are complete strangers in my pool." The driver whistled. "Man, that's messed up. They break in?" "The HOA president did," Morgan replied, his voice tight. "She's apparently decided my property is the perfect venue for their private party while I'm out of town." Halfway to the airport, Morgan received a call from Raj. "Police are here," he said. "But there's a problem. Diane is telling them she has permission to be there. Says you authorized the HOA to use your pool for their quarterly social event because you're such a community-minded resident." Morgan nearly choked. "She's vivaciate. Put me on the phone with an officer. Right now." After what felt like an eternity of background noise and muffled conversations, a deep voice came on the line. "This is Officer Ramirez. Are you the homeowner?" "Yes, Morgan Chen. I'm currently in Seattle for a business conference. I absolutely did not authorize anyone to enter my property or use any of my facilities. They are all trespassing, and I want them removed immediately." There was a pause, and Morgan could hear Officer Ramirez asking Raj to show him identification confirming he was indeed the neighbor. In the background, Diane's voice had risen to a shrill pitch that made Morgan wince even through the phone. "All right, Mr. Chen," Officer Ramirez finally said. "Your neighbor has confirmed your identity. We'll handle this situation, but we'll need you to file a formal complaint when you return." "Absolutely. I'll be back in the morning," Morgan replied, relieved that someone was finally taking control of the situation. Before hanging up, he heard Officer Ramirez addressing the party guests, informing them that they were trespassing and needed to vacate the premises immediately. Morgan's security cameras provided a front-row seat to the chaos that ensued. As Officer Ramirez and his partner began instructing people to leave, Diane moved into the center of the gathering, her face flushed with indignation and perhaps too much champagne. "This is ridiculous," her voice carried clearly through Morgan's microphones. "Morgan gave me permission. I have texts to prove it." The officers remained calm but firm. "Ma'am, we've spoken directly with the homeowner. He's confirmed no one has permission to be here. Please gather your belongings and exit the property." Diane's composure cracked entirely. "Do you know who I am? I'm the president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. This is an official HOA function. HOA authority doesn't extend to entering private property without permission," Officer Ramirez replied evenly. "Now, everyone needs to leave or we'll begin issuing citations for trespassing." The partygoers began awkwardly collecting their things, many casting embarrassed glances at Diane, who remained rooted in place, hands on hips. Morgan watched with grim satisfaction as people filed out, their festive mood thoroughly dampened. But Diane wasn't going quietly. As the officers escorted her toward the gate, she broke away, marching toward one of Morgan's security cameras with alarming intensity. Her face filled the frame, mascara slightly smudged, cheeks flushed with anger. "I know you're watching this, Morgan," she hissed, pointing a manicured finger directly at the lens. "This is completely unprofessional. The HOA will be discussing your behavior at our next meeting." Officer Ramirez gently but firmly took Diane's arm, guiding her away from the camera. "Ma'am, please don't make this situation more difficult than it needs to be." "My husband plays golf with the police chief," Diane shouted, her voice carrying across the now empty backyard. "You'll regret this, both of you." Morgan watched, equal parts horrified and vindicated, as Diane was finally escorted from his property, still loudly protesting her innocence. In the aftermath of her exit, Officer Ramirez spoke directly to the camera, assuring Morgan they would remain on site until they were certain all trespassers had left and the property was secure. On his way to the airport, Morgan received a flurry of text messages from various neighbors, some apologizing for attending what they thought was an authorized event, others expressing shock at Diane's behavior. Most concerning were the series of increasingly hostile messages from Diane herself, ranging from self-righteous indignation to vague threats about HOA bylaws and property value protection measures. As his plane took off for the return journey home, Morgan found himself wondering how a simple weekend trip had spiraled into such madness. One thing was certain: his peaceful existence in Willowbrook Estates was about to become considerably more complicated. Morgan's plane touched down at 6:18 a.m. By 7:30, he was pulling into his driveway, exhausted but running on pure adrenaline. The neighborhood was eerily quiet as morning light filtered through the trees. Nothing about the peaceful suburban street suggested the chaos that had erupted just hours earlier. As he approached his front door, Raj emerged from his house across the street, looking equally tired but relieved to see Morgan. "Man, am I glad you're back," Raj said, jogging over. "Last night was wild." Morgan sighed, unlocking his door. "Thanks for calling the cops. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." "Police stayed until everyone left," Raj explained, following Morgan inside. "They did a full walkthrough to make sure no one was hiding, locked everything up. Officer Ramirez gave me his card to pass along to you." Morgan nodded gratefully, then froze as they entered the backyard. Despite the police supervision of the party's end, the evidence of invasion remained everywhere. His once pristine backyard looked like the aftermath of a frat party. Half-empty plastic cups littered the pool deck. Someone had spilled what looked like red wine on his outdoor furniture cushions. Floating in the pool were deflated beach balls, a lost flip-flop, and what appeared to be a waterlogged cell phone. "Jesus," Morgan muttered, running a hand through his hair. "They trashed the place." Raj whistled low. "And this is after some of them tried to clean up when the cops arrived. You should have seen it before." Morgan pulled out his phone and began methodically photographing the damage. "Did the police say anything about filing charges?" "They said trespassing for sure. Property damage too, obviously," Raj gestured around. But here's where it gets interesting. Apparently several guests told the officers they paid Diane $50 each for what she called an exclusive pool party experience. Morgan looked up sharply. "She charged people to use my pool?" "Yep. Called it a fundraiser for neighborhood beautification projects." Raj shook his head in disbelief. "Some HOA members were pretty upset when they realized you hadn't actually approved any of it. The treasurer, what's his name, Fred, was especially upset when he found out the event wasn't in the official HOA books." Morgan's doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. On his front steps stood Officer Ramirez, now in plain clothes but still carrying his badge. "Mr. Chen, I'm off duty now, but I want to follow up. We took statements from several attendees last night who corroborated that Mrs. Whitfield collected money for this unauthorized event." "I heard," Morgan said, inviting him in. "What does that mean legally?" "It elevates the situation from simple trespassing to potential fraud," Officer Ramirez explained as they walked to the kitchen. "I've already filed the initial report, but you'll need to come to the station to complete your statement. The detective assigned to your case will want to see those security recordings." As Officer Ramirez left with a copy of Morgan's security footage, another visitor arrived. Mrs. Patel from 2 doors down, a retired judge and the longest-serving HOA member before Diane's presidency. "I came to apologize," she said, her expression grave. "I received an email invitation that appeared to be official HOA correspondence. It stated you had generously offered your home for our spring social while you were away on business." She handed Morgan her phone, showing him the email with an authentic-looking HOA letterhead. "The rest of us had no idea this wasn't authorized," Mrs. Patel continued. "When the police arrived, Diane insisted you had changed your mind at the last minute out of spite. Some of us had doubts. It didn't seem like something you would do, but she was so convincing." Morgan scrolled through the email, noting Diane's careful wording that implied without explicitly stating that he had offered his home. "Have you spoken with other board members since last night?" Mrs. Patel nodded, her expression hardening. "An emergency meeting has been called for this afternoon. I suspect Diane's presidency will be very brief from this point forward." By noon, Morgan's backyard had been transformed again, this time by a small army of apologetic neighbors who had shown up with cleaning supplies, trash bags, and a pool service contact. While they worked, Morgan made 3 important phone calls. One to his lawyer, one to the police station to schedule his formal statement, and one to his company's HR department to explain why he needed to extend his remote work arrangement for a few more days. As he hung up from the last call, his phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. "You made a serious mistake, Morgan. The HOA exists to protect property values," and the week following the unauthorized pool party unfolded like a neighborhood soap opera, with Morgan reluctantly cast as the lead. His security footage had become something of a local sensation after several board members who'd seen it during the emergency meeting couldn't help but share the details. Morgan found himself receiving sympathetic nods at the grocery store and supportive text messages from neighbors he'd barely spoken to before. On Tuesday morning, Morgan met with his attorney, Eleanor Wright, a sharp-witted property lawyer who'd reviewed his case with barely concealed delight. "In 20 years of practice, I've dealt with plenty of HOA nightmares," she said, organizing the evidence Morgan had provided. "But this, breaking into your home, charging admission, then claiming it was an official function, Diane Whitfield has given us what we lawyers call a gift case." Morgan sipped his coffee, feeling the tension headache that had become his constant companion begin to ease. "So what's our next step?" "We have multiple options," Eleanor explained. "Criminal charges are being handled by the police. Trespassing and fraud are on the table. Civilly, we're looking at breaking and entering, property damage, and potential defamation based on those texts she sent implying you were vindictive and uncooperative." Morgan nodded, thinking of the threatening message still on his phone. "What about the money she collected from attendees?" "That's where it gets particularly interesting," Eleanor smiled. According to the statements given to police, Diane collected approximately $1,500 from attendees. None of that money has been deposited into HOA accounts. The board treasurer has checked extensively. "So she pocketed it all," Morgan said, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction that his instincts about Diane had been correct all along. "It appears so. The new interim HOA president, Mrs. Patel, I believe, has provided written confirmation that there was never an authorized HOA event planned at your property. The board is being extremely cooperative, likely to avoid being named in any lawsuit." As Morgan left the attorney's office with a clear action plan, his phone rang. It was Officer Ramirez. "Mr. Chen, thought you'd want to know. We formally charged Diane Whitfield with criminal trespass, property damage, and fraud. She was processed this morning and released on her own recognizance." "How did she take it?" Morgan asked, unable to suppress his curiosity. Officer Ramirez's chuckle carried through the phone. "Let's just say she's maintaining her position that this was all a misunderstanding. She claimed you had verbally approved the event weeks ago, but were playing games to embarrass her. When we asked for witnesses to this supposed conversation, she couldn't provide any." By Thursday, the story had evolved further when Morgan received an unexpected visitor. Harold Whitfield, Diane's husband, a quiet man most residents knew only as the tall figure who silently attended HOA meetings at Diane's side. "I came to apologize," Harold said, standing awkwardly on Morgan's front porch, looking older and more tired than Morgan remembered, "and to make restitution. Morgan invited him in, curious despite his reservations. Once seated at the kitchen counter, Harold placed an envelope on the surface between them. "This contains $3,200, he said quietly. "It covers the $1,500 Diane collected from guests, plus an additional $1,700 for property damages based on the estimates your pool service provided to the HOA. Morgan stared at the envelope without touching it. "I appreciate this, but my lawyer has advised me." Harold held up a hand. "This isn't a settlement offer or an attempt to make the charges go away. It's simply the right thing to do." He paused, looking down at his clasped hands. "You should know that Diane and I are separating. This situation has brought to light some concerning behaviors that I've ignored for too long." The revelation caught Morgan off guard. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be," Harold replied with unexpected firmness. This incident wasn't isolated. It was just the first time her actions had legal consequences. He stood to leave, then hesitated. "She's been ordered to undergo a psychological evaluation as part of her release conditions. Between that and the therapy I've been encouraging for years, perhaps something positive will come from this mess." After Harold left, Morgan called his attorney to report the unexpected development. She advised him to document the conversation and payment, but emphasized that it didn't impact the ongoing legal proceedings. That evening, as Morgan sat on his restored pool deck watching the sunset, Mrs. Patel stopped by with a folder of documents. "The board met again today," she explained, handing him the folder. "These are the official minutes recording Diane's permanent removal as president, along with a formal apology to you from the HOA. We've also included the amendments to our bylaws that we've unanimously approved." Morgan scanned the documents, raising his eyebrows at the extensive changes. Community event authorization requiring documented homeowner consent, mandatory financial transparency for all HOA activities, explicit prohibition against entering private property without written permission. "We're calling it the Whitfield Amendment," Mrs. Patel said with a wry smile. "Every cloud has a silver lining." Diane's behavior was a wake-up call for all of us about unchecked power within community organizations. As darkness fell and Mrs. Patel departed, Morgan's phone chimed with an email notification. It was from the conference organizers, apologizing for his early departure and inviting him to speak at next year's event. The suggested topic made him laugh out loud. Security in the modern age. Protecting your assets even when you're not home. Morgan glanced at his security cameras, now upgraded and positioned with even better coverage of his property, and decided that perhaps he did have some expertise to share. After all, not everyone's home security system had caught an HOA president in the act of throwing an unauthorized pool party, and the resulting footage had changed an entire community's governance structure. Sometimes, Morgan reflected, the best revenge wasn't just seeing justice served, it was watching positive change emerge from chaos. And if he happened to gain a new speaking engagement and some